Hello, and welcome to this week's myNewsWrap. News from the world of SAP, from the world of Microsoft, and from the world in between. So let's see what this week brought on news to us. I would like to start with a frequent guest here on the show with his contributions, Tobias Hoffmann, who brought out another blog post about the learning experience at SAP with SAP. I think Tobias already had some blog posts on that topic. Now this is kind of picking up a tweet by the SAP Chief Learning Officer Max Wessel that he, I think, brought out last week or week before, and kind of discusses the approach that SAP makes on enabling the community and developers for their topics, and compares that to other vendors like Microsoft and how they do that. And yeah, it's from my perspective, this is putting forward some very fair points around the topic of learning. So from an outside in perspective, you get the impression that SAP still covers learning as something that has to bring them money directly by the learning per se. So by the offerings that they have, by the certifications that they have, by the classes that they give. And that's kind of not the way how you enable developers. And that also makes no sense in the year 2021. And that's kind of clearly addressed here within this blog post. And I absolutely agree with the points. Also comparing it with how other vendors approach it, as I said before, like Microsoft, like AWS, and Tobias picks up Microsoft to really do a great job with their learning experience, because they really have it all in one place. So you have your learning, you have your machines that you have to use to make your hands dirty with the learning, all integrated, for example, in the learning path, like he brings the example of learning Kubernetes. That's really great. And that's all missing at the SAP side. So yeah, as the blog states, there is quite some homework, quite some backlog list. And I hope that without any offense, there will be more actions and less talking by the Chief Learning Officer of SAP, because currently I don't think that they are on the completely right track for enabling developers, which will lead to some consequent problems when it comes to adopting the technologies. So let's see how this evolves. However, as usual, when Tobias blogs, worth reading it. Then let's switch to the business technology platform. There is an announcement on a blog post series by Kevin Misc, developer advocate at SAP, who announced a blog post series about describing an end-to-end journey with the SAP Business Technology Platform, bringing together all the different services from SAP HANA to Kyma to mobile services and so on. And there is one blog post that I referenced in the show notes that kind of wraps things up. So what does he want to do with it? And then this week, there already the first blog post in the series came out about the CAP service. That is kind of the center of the end-to-end journey, exposing OData v2, v4, and REST endpoints in one single project. So I think that's really a great initiative. So seeing how things can work together and not only looking at some particular bits and pieces, but getting one bigger picture and also seeing how things work together, or maybe how things, do not perfectly work together. That's also something that is worth knowing. Then one news from the Kyma area. There is one really cool blog post about Kyma on SAP BTP and where the data is stored. So what happens if you use the managed offering of Kyma and you create persistent volume claims? Where are they stored? How can you handle them? What can you do with them? And this blog post kind of guides you through how to create a persistent volume claim, how to take a snapshot of the volume claim, and how to restore the volume claim if you have deleted it from the snapshot. And as you will see, it's quite some things to do with, of course, YAML and applying the YAML to your Kubernetes cluster. But I think that's really quite valuable information if you start your journey with Kyma, because that's something that you, at a very first glance, do not really think about. Then one last blog post from the area of SAP. And that's a quite extensive blog post about the SAP Fiori 3 update that came out this week, really covering everything around this update, starting from the updated design guidelines and the impact on the controls and when is which thing available and what additional information is out there. So if you're working with Fiori, if you are kind of want to keep up to date with all the stuff, then that's definitely worth a look, because there are also a lot of references within the blog that guide you to more and additional information at the end of the blog post. Now, that was it from the SAP part of the house. Let's switch to Microsoft, to the serverless area. And there was one announcement that was just great. It's a small announcement, but I think that really opens the door for quite some developers to start with Azure Functions, because the storage emulator Azure Write now also supports tables, so the table API. Up to now, if you wanted to do a local development with Azure Functions, especially with durable functions, or if you want to use the table API as a trigger or as an input or output binding for functions, you had the possibility to do that locally if you are working on a Windows machine, because there is the storage emulator for Windows, which is, however, deprecated. And now the successor, Azure Write, it's out for quite some time now, but the table support was missing. And now with the new version, Azure Write v3, version 3.12.0, table support is in preview, and I already did a little bit of testing around that, and it works perfectly with durable functions. It works perfectly with durable entities, at least what I have tried out. So you can now develop locally Azure Functions on Windows, on Mac, and on Linux, or on Windows Subsystem for Linux on Windows, because you have Azure Write running as a cross emulator on all those platforms, as it's basically based on TypeScript. So that's great news for the Azure Function developers. Then I also wanted to highlight one video that was, or video podcast that was presented by Mark Duka and Konstantin Lepeshenkov, not so easy to pronounce, on the durable functions monitor. So if you're working in the area of durable functions, you might have come across that functionality. If not, then that's definitely worth a look, because this durable functions monitor really helps you with monitoring durable functions, with taking a look at the execution history of durable functions, sequence diagrams, and so on. So if you're watching the video, you now exactly see what you can expect, how the dependencies are between your durable functions, your clients, your starters, and so on. Really great functionality, and especially also integrated within VS Code. So that's quite cool. So if you're working with durable functions, that's definitely worth a look. Then from the area of news from the broader Microsoft ecosystem, there is one service that crossed my path this week, which is available in preview, and that's the Azure Web Pub Sub service, which is a fully managed, globally available service for making use within pub sub scenarios, which allows you basically to build apps with WebSockets on a really high scale. So no problems if you are in a fully IoT scenario where we really have a lot of messages. Then this comes in quite handy. It's in preview now, so you can already try that out. And of course, it perfectly interacts with Azure Functions. So there's another way now how to put things together on Azure with Azure Functions and making use of another service that really makes your life easier when it comes to pub/sub scenarios. Then I would like to highlight one video from the DevOps Labs. I think I announced them 3 weeks ago that there is kind of an ongoing series on a more or less regular basis on the topic of on-premise to cloud. So how do I get my stuff from on-premise to cloud, be it from an infrastructure perspective or also from an application perspective. And this session, episode 8, now really focuses on the application part and on how to bring an ASP.NET 4 application that is living on-premise to the cloud in a containerized way. And what are the advantages? What do you have to think about if you go down that path? So really something that I think a lot of us will get in touch with in the future when modernizing applications. So that's really worth watching. Now, another blog post that I like to highlight is about Azure application registrations, enterprise apps, and managed entities. That's quite an important topic if you create applications within Azure, but that's something that you really have to wrap your head around. And this blog post greatly wraps it up. What is an application registration? What is an enterprise app? What are managed entities? What are, let me look, there is another, what is the conditional access topic when you use all that stuff? So this really gives you a great overview, and I think really shows you how the things interact and work together. So quite important if you are dealing with applications on Azure. Then some news from the DevOps area. First of all, terraforming with Azure DevOps. So if you're starting with Azure DevOps and you want to use Terraform, then I highly recommend this blog post that I referenced within the show notes, Terraforming from Zero to Pipelines as Code with Azure DevOps, because this really gives you a kickstart really from the very beginning to deploying your stuff with Azure DevOps, making use of Terraform and not making use of the plain ARM templates or Azure Bicep. So that's kind of another choice that you have. And then there is one topic that's kind of coming. So from my perspective, it's not GitHub Actions, it's custom GitHub Actions. So there are two things that crossed my path this week around creating your own GitHub Actions. So your custom GitHub Actions, because maybe the built-in GitHub Actions may not perfectly cover your requirements, so you can create your own ones. And there is one blog post by Robin Manuel Thiel about creating your own GitHub action with .NET. And there is one GitHub repository by a Microsoft Cloud Solution Architect, Clemens Welken, about how to make use of such a custom workflow in order to get the application insights key. So if you're starting in that area, I think there are some points where it's worth to take a look at. Now, let's switch to the event area. There's one event that I would like to highlight. It's only available in German language, and it's the Microsoft DevOps Forum that takes place on the 7th of July. And it focuses, so it's not a big conference, it's basically a session from 9 to 12:30. It focuses on DevOps for small and medium businesses. So if you are in that area or if you have customers in that area, I think that's definitely worth a look, because I think the small and medium businesses are quite holding back a bit on that really important topic of DevOps and security. Bringing those two worlds together. And I think that can be an icebreaker in order to push that topic within such companies. Now, with that, I would like to switch to the last area of today. So we have no news on the SAP Microsoft in-between world, but I'm quite sure there will be some news in the coming weeks. Let's switch to developer productivity. There is one thing that I would like to highlight for those who are lucky and are already living on the Viva train of Microsoft, so on the, I would say, extension of the Teams functionality with respect to learning, with respect to collaborating, because as of the beginning of April, the Viva Connection desktop app is available, which was not available before. So you can now use that on your desktop, and I'm not one of the lucky guys who are already on the Viva train, but I saw quite some live demos, especially from Microsoft, and that's really cool stuff, bringing together all the information within your company in a curated view that really helps you to find things, to get an update on things. Really cool stuff, and yeah, available as a desktop app. And then one last news about Dependabot. So if you are using GitHub as your repo, you might have come across Dependabot, which is a bot that watches your dependencies within your repositories and creates automatically pull requests if there are changes, especially, for example, if there are updates with respect to security problems within existing NPM modules. And Dependabot was up to now in preview, and since the beginning of May, it's now available as GA. There hasn't changed too much, except that it's now GA, but there are some minor features that have been removed. I don't think that they are really super critical, but if you're working with Dependabot, you should take a short look at this blog post and see if there's something important in for you, or if some things might break for you. And with that, I'm already through today's session, myNewsWrap. So I hope I had some interesting news for you. I hope I had some food for the brain for you. And with that, I wish you a nice Friday, a nice weekend, and see you next week. Until then, bye.